Is it your intuition warning you about something, or is it your anxiety? This is a really common question, and I believe that once you watch this video, you won't confuse the two again. So I know that's a big promise that you'll never confuse them again, but I'm going to give you a couple of concepts that will really highlight the difference. So the very first thing I want you to think about is that anxiety is an emotion. Intuition is actually not an emotion. Intuition is a system of processing information. That will be a little bit more clear in a moment. But anxiety is an emotion. It is an emotional feeling. Now, anxiety has physical components, and I talk about this in a lot of my anxiety videos. So you could have a physical feeling of an upset stomach, heart race, sweating, tension, right? There's a lot of physical feelings and the emotional feeling, and your brain knows this is anxiety. So I think one reason people confuse anxiety with intuition is that they believe intuition equals gut response. Now, your intuition might make itself known through a gut response, but intuition is not only a gut response. So the way I began to think about intuition, both exploring it for myself as well as working with people for 20 years as a psychotherapist, is that intuition synthesizes our gut response with patterns that we are aware of both consciously and subconsciously, and with our sense of knowing ourselves, our emotional intelligence. So intuition brings all of that together. It's not just one piece. Intuition is actually a fairly complex, almost full body process. Like it's kind of a mental process, but it's really kind of a full body process. And intuition works best when our whole brain is online, when we have access to our unconscious, subconscious, and conscious thinking. When we're in our fight, flight, freeze mode, we are only back here with this amygdala, right? That tells us run away, right? It's not full brain thinking. So beginning to think about intuition as more of a total process, a system of thought, right? A system of integrating thoughts and feelings will help you distinguish. So that's point number one. Point number two, knowing yourself and knowing your habitual emotions. If anxiety is a habitual emotion, then it isn't giving you good information. Most of our emotions give us lots of different information, and if we learn to read our emotions, it can be really, really helpful in decision making. But if we have one emotion we just go to, it could be depression, it could be anxiety, right? We turn all sorts of information, all sorts of emotions into that one emotion of anxiety. So if anxiety is your habitual go-to, you feel it a lot, it drives your life, then when you are having this question, it's probably anxiety. So emotional intelligence takes into account being aware of what our habitual go-to emotions are and not taking them quite as seriously as some of our other emotions, which are giving us good information. And I do have a bunch of videos on emotional intelligence, which is very helpful for developing your intuition. Number three is that your intuition knows that risks exist. Your anxiety wants you to believe that there is one right answer here, only one, and if you make the wrong one, it's disastrous. That's your anxiety talking. Because we can all make decisions, really be in touch with our intuition, be in touch with all the facts and figures, really think things through, know what we want, make a decision, and it's not always the right decision. Life is complex and life is uncertain. And I know sometimes people really dislike that when I talk about life being uncertain in a video trying to help people with their anxiety. Sometimes people will be like, yeah, you shouldn't emphasize that. Well, not emphasizing it is ignoring a reality and learning to be like, okay, things are uncertain. I'm powerless over certain things, the weather for sure, right? So bringing in that reality and learning to sort of be okay with it is key for getting over anxiety. Number four, your intuition at some point is sort of a calmer knowing. It is not jumping around with all sort of what if, we know what anxiety is. We know what it sounds like. Well, what if this person really isn't a safe person? Well, what if I make the wrong decision and take the wrong job or move to the wrong town or marry the wrong person? What if, right? So that's our anxiety. Our intuition is given the information I have right now, what I feel, what I think, all of it, this is the best path to go down. And I will see some videos on this topic on YouTube, and people will say intuition is fast. Well, I disagree. We do have fast thinking and slow thinking. And our fast thinking, some of that is intuitive, some of it is very instinctual, and some of it is very bias based. Our fast thinking is not always accurate. And I know that when I struggle with a decision, sometimes I'll be getting to the point where I'm ready to make it, and I'll make the decision one day, and then I'll say to myself, I'm going to sleep on it, because I know that if I make a decision and I'm like, okay, I'm picking A out of A and B, I go to sleep, I'll wake up in the morning with a feeling of right decision, going with A. Or I'll wake up in the morning with a no. So relaxation, sleep, getting out of that urgency of thinking things through lets our whole brain work together, and we get answers that way. This is why sometimes when you're dealing with a big problem, the answer might pop into your head in a shower. You might not even be thinking about it. All of a sudden you're taking a shower and you're like, oh, I know the answer. And that can be your intuition. It can feel fast, but you've been thinking about it a long time. You've been gathering information for a long time, and you finally let your brain slow down and calm down to the point that it pulls everything together and you just know. So I want to give you a couple of real life examples. Somebody who I was talking to this week, a young woman, 26 years old, and I asked her, do you ever confuse intuition and anxiety? And she was like, oh yeah, absolutely, all the time. So I asked her to give me an example, and she picked a pretty easy example. And the 3 examples I'm going to give you today, first one is on a pretty minor topic, and they get a little bit more intense as I go on. But she said that she and her boyfriend were going to go to Boston for the weekend, and it was St. Patrick's Day. And at first she was excited, but then a few days before the trip, she started to get nervous. St. Patrick's Day in Boston, it could be really crowded. What if something happens? And she said she had that whole refrain going on in her head, and it was anxiety. And part of her was like, ooh, is this a sign I shouldn't go? Is this a sign something bad is going to happen? But then she said to herself, no, you always worry about this. When you have a trip to go on or there's going to be a lot of crowds, you always worry about this. You go, you have fun, and it's fine. So what did she demonstrate there? She demonstrated an awareness of her habitual pattern. And by knowing that habitual pattern, she was also able to bring in her past experiences where she's gone against that feeling and had a good time. And she was able to integrate those things and come up with a decision, and they went and they had a good time. Okay, second example. You go for a job interview and the interviewer asks you a lot of tough questions, throws you kind of for a loop. You're not really sure. You're giving good answers. You're surprised. You feel like his body language was not very friendly to you. And after the interview, you say to a friend, oh, I really think it didn't go well. I don't think I'm going to get the job. So is that intuition or is that anxiety? So on this one, right, our intuition is part of our system. Remember, I said it was a system. It's part of our system that reads body language. So this person, you, might, in that situation, have been reading the body language of the other person right. And maybe they didn't like you the second you walked in the door. Sometimes we get that feeling from people, but we don't know this person. Maybe this person doesn't have enormous social skills. Maybe they don't have great emotional intelligence. Maybe they're that way with everybody. Maybe they had a really bad experience earlier in the day in their personal life and they're in a bad mood, right? They could be in a really bad mood, not be polite to you, and you still may end up being the best candidate they saw all day. So we can take into account our gut response and our interpretation of how things go, but that doesn't mean that we're 100% correct. And so if you leave this interview and you just keep going over it and over it and worrying about it, that piece of it is anxiety. That's the piece that matters. Whether your gut response to the person who interviewed you was correct or not doesn't really matter. If you go home and you're going over it and over it and over it and you're worrying, which, to be honest, many of us would if we really want the job, right? I'm not saying that there would be like something horribly wrong with you, but that's anxiety. Anxiety is worrying about a problem you can do nothing about. Anxiety is not wanting to accept uncertainty. And until you hear back after that interview, you have uncertainty. So that's where, again, like this relaxing with the concept of uncertainty, super important. Okay, let me know if that made sense to you, that the key piece is not so much whether your interpretation of what happened was intuition or anxiety. The key piece is how much you're worrying about it afterwards and whether you can do anything about it. Let me know if that made sense. All right, someone else I was talking with this week has a family member who has addiction and alcoholism and is frequently getting into difficult situations, if not very dangerous ones. And often there will be gaps in time when the person I was speaking with doesn't hear from their relative, right? That happens when you have a relative who has addiction issues, right? Sometimes they just go AWOL. You don't know where they are. Is it natural to worry in those situations? Of course, it's natural to worry. But again, worrying excessively about things you can do nothing about or future events that may or may not happen is anxiety. But this person said to me, sometimes days can go by, they don't worry about a thing, and other times they'll wake up with a sense something's not right. Is that intuition or is it anxiety? So if you wake up with a sense something's not right and there is something you can do, you know where the person is, you know who you could call, you want to go check something, fine, do it. But if you've been here before, if this is like a common theme and you wake up in the middle of the night and then you end up calling all the police departments or the hospitals and you go into a whole panic trying to find the person, and you've done this a number of times, and then in the morning you find that the person is like sleeping in your backyard or they're sleeping in their car or they're fine, and you know this, then yeah, this is being driven by anxiety. Again, understandable, but not healthy. And when I say not healthy, I mean not healthy for you physically. Stress contributes like to health issues, right? And it doesn't make us happy. So if we think of intuition as partially being pattern recognition, right? And you bring pattern recognition into that scenario, you'll be like, oh, this is a familiar pattern. I've been here before. Your intuition will tell you this fits the pattern of what you've already experienced. All right, I hope this was really helpful. I hope I lived up to my promise, and I'd love to know. So comment below our best decisions, and this is scientifically proven, and I am about to come out with, or maybe I already came out with it, I don't always know the order things will be posted, but I will have a video on intuition and decision making because it is proven that combining the two things of intuition as well as facts and data make the best decisions. But we can develop our intuition to be stronger, and we can learn to calm our anxiety so that it doesn't get in the way of our intuition. And actually, the program I have, Roadmap to Joy and Authentic Confidence, really builds on all the components that come into having solid intuition, including emotional intelligence, deepening your self-knowledge, transforming and healing your negative core beliefs, right? Because those are the kind of things that can get in the way of our intuition being able to speak to us more loudly than some of those negative beliefs or habitual emotions. So if you're interested, that program is on my website, but I also do have a free PDF called Transform Your Negative Core Beliefs, which might be super helpful for you. And I have a bunch of other free resources, so check it out. It will be in the description to this video or on my website, and I'll put the link here. And I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next week.